This is General Syrskyi. He is the chief of all the armed forces in Ukraine. Doesn't often talk at any great length. Every once in a while he weighs in, but he has given a couple of interviews in the last week, which were really quite detailed, and it was clear what he wanted to say, and that is basically, yes, it is really tough. We have obvious weaknesses. We don't have the manpower that Russia has. We don't have the centralized missile production, et cetera, that Russia has, and that tells on the battlefield. But then when you go into detail, the question is, what does it mean when we say that they're losing the war? Well, they're losing territory at a rate, as he put it, of somewhere between 1.5 and about 4 kilometers per month to the Russians. It's a big country, the size of France. So what we're talking about, is this year about 0.7% or so of Ukrainian territory. So yes, they're losing territory. They are not taking back territory, but now they're being asked to accept a really, difficult peace deal. One that, in its initial draft, it's been changed since, we don't know the details of that, but in its initial draft, one that did two things. One was that it gave away territory that the Russians have been trying and failing to take for actually a decade. And that, and at the same time, they're being asked to, accept that there should be different, constraints on their own armed forces and so on, and no firm security guarantees to ensure that Russia doesn't just pocket the gains and then invade again at a later date, as it's done before. So, and this is all based on the idea that they're in such a terrible position that they're losing the war, and if they don't accept this deal now, they'll have to take a worse one later. The reality that Syrskyi was trying to point out is that take Bakrovsk. This is a city that Ukraine will probably lose in the next few weeks. The Russians have been trying to take it for more than a year. They've concentrated 170,000 troops there. It's a kind of mid-sized town of about 60,000 people. Russia's asking for the Ukrainians to give up what they call the fortress belt of cities, which is north of Покровsk. And those cities are like 180,000, 160,000, 80,000, and again 60,000. So it would, at the current pace, it would take Russia years and the loss of tens of thousands of troops in order to take those cities. So why should the Ukrainians give them away? They're just not losing that badly.
Marc, one thing I think the world knows through world history with Russia, boy, they can play the long game on the battlefield. We've seen that time and time again. Does this Ukrainian general have any strategy for anything other than just kind of fighting day to day to preserve territory?
Well, he doesn't need one, essentially. So the Ukrainian strategy is to just gradually increase the cost on Russia, the cost of continuing the war. Russia's economy has survived very well, much better than expected through the war, but it's showing signs now of some real difficulty. The level of Russian casualties is very high. And it's also, what you were referring to before, what we know about, Russian, the long game, as you say, that's in defense. That's when, Russia digs in and is pushing back Napoleon, pushing back Hitler. And yes, that it is formidable. But Russia is not playing defense. It is at the moment invading another country. It's a war of choice. And it's a calculation for Putin, as to when he declares victory. So the Ukrainians are simply saying, the deal that was put to them initially, the 28-point plan, that was simply the Russian demands. And Russians, it's their kind of starting offer. It's what they want in order to just achieve their war aims. And the fear in Ukraine is that all this will do is give the Russians a major defensive belt, after which there are no more natural defenses until you get to the major, large Ukrainian cities like Dnipro. It'll simply give that to them, and then the Russians will have no reason not to start again if they want to.
Marc, do you think that there's the possibility that, I mean, President Trump seems pretty impatient with the way these peace talks are going. Is it a possibility that he may just walk away from these talks?
Yes. The question is how. So he has done this a couple of times before. There have been, American attempts to get a peace deal. He talked to the Ukrainians, put pressure on them. Then he went to the Russians, and the Russians finally just wouldn't give any kind of concession. If that happens again, we may see yet again the Americans just sort of Trump walk away, lose patience, and nothing, really significant changes. But there is a sense this time that he has that it may not, he may be more dug in than in the past, and we'll have to see. But if he does say to the Ukrainians, you simply have to accept the Russian terms, and if you don't, we will take away even the selling of American weapons to the Europeans to give to you. Previously under the Biden administration, the Americans gave weapons. Now they're selling them via the Europeans. But he has the option to say we won't even do that, which would be catastrophic for the Ukrainians, very difficult for them to continue. Similarly, with intelligence sharing, he could say, I'm going to take that away.
Marc, 30 seconds left here. What is the support from the people here for this war? What's the mood there? Do they want to continue to fight this fight?
Well, there was a recent opinion poll which Trump actually cited, and it says that 82% of Ukrainians want a peace. They want peace. They want to end a war. You could have done that, at the start of the war. But the rest of the poll asked them on what terms, and there it was clear that they weren't willing to give up this kind of territory, and that was pretty overwhelming too, around 70% or so.